All right, welcome to Distance from Center. I'm Trent. This is John Horton, and today we want to get into constructing the Mount Rushmore of slalom. John, go ahead and explain what we're talking about.
Well, so actually, Trent, this is a concept that I first really got from you, but it's really who are the four great standout athletes that if we have to name our greats, who are our four? Who would we chisel into the side of a mountain and say, those are the greatest slalom skiers of all time?
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a list and you've got a list. Tell me about your list.
Well, yeah, so I'm not ready to start chiseling yet, because there's just so many different factors. Like for me, there's probably influence is probably the most important factor. So who helped draw what we see in front of us now? So I'm going to just start, for me, if I had to start chiseling today, and I know this is unbending and it's painfully obvious, but it's absolutely, Andy Mappel.
Yes.
And just like the quick why, as if I had to, but 14 Masters titles, from 1987 to 2003. So, 19 years of winning this. He won 14 in the span of 19 years. 6 world titles. Again, that same kind of time frame, 81 to 2001. So if you just think about what slalom looked like in 1981 compared to what it looked like in 2001, it couldn't have looked more different. Scores to equipment to levels of training, and he just kept winning and evolving, and evolving probably isn't even the right word, because he was ahead of the evolution of the sport. He was steering the evolution of the sport. So, it's not so much that he evolved with the sport, but he evolved the sport. And then 9 world records. And the cool thing is his world records spanned from 5 at 39 to 1 at 43, and that's probably the most profound leap. There was guys that records went from deep 38 to mid 39, but to go from 39 to 43, he was there with Rogers, with Beauchesne, with Parrish, these guys who did the impossible, and few people, one person has done it more than Mappel. So that's where I start. That's where I start, banging into the side of this mountain, is absolutely with Andy.
I could not agree with you more. I 100% agree. So just to kind of reframe the way you put it, from his first world record to his last world record was a span of 7 buoys, right? From that 5 at 39 to 1 at 43. I mean, if you think about that, that's amazing that he was the best skier in the world when people weren't running 39 yet. And he was the best skier in the world when people were just starting to run 39, or just starting to run 41 and get into 43, which is just astounding.
Yeah.
That brings me to the next guy that I would, if I had to chisel today, I gotta give it to Bob Lapointe. Just exactly an era before Andy. I know there's a little bit of overlap, but Bob had 5 of everything. He run Masters 5 times.
Yes.
He had 5 world records and 5 world championships.
Yep. And those are in the span of 10 years. So they were tightly bunched also, where, Andy's spanned out almost 20 years. Bob did, some of those numbers are awful close, but he did it in such a short time span. Right.
Well, so Andy's 7-ball advance was in 13 years. Bob's 5 world records went from 4 at 38 to 5 at 39.
Yes.
So they literally butt up against each other, and Bob did that in 8 years.
Yep, 76 to 84.
Right.
Yeah.
Just amazing. For me, I know that some people are going to argue against Bob, or I assume there would, but to me, he is absolutely chiseled in stone. It's those next 2 spots that are maybe more debatable.
Yeah, and I think when you said argue against Bob, I think, just to be clear, that no one on the water ski planet would not have considered Bob to be one of the greatest, but when there's only 4 spots, that would be one. But actually, that was absolutely on my list of if I had to start chiseling today. So it's these last 2 that make it kind of tough. So for me, I think it would be remiss to think that Nate Smith hasn't already done enough to have his spot permanently, in the annals of water ski history, or to have his face or likeness chiseled into this water ski Mount Rushmore. So I guess, correct me if I'm off on some of these, but I think it's 4 Masters titles at the moment. From 20.
I believe it's 3. I think it's 3, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I think it's 3.
We'll double check on that one. I had 4 from 2012 to current. 2 world titles already.
Right.
Starting in 13 to I guess it would be 13 to 17. And then I guess 3 different world records already, right?
Yeah, I think there
was a 4th that got knocked back, but his first world record of 2013. In 2013, to his current world record, 3:43. But and the thing is you're looking at this. He won his first Masters in 2012. He won his first world title in 2013. First world record in 2013. We didn't know who he was before 2011.
Correct.
So I don't think anyone has launched more of a sneak attack. And the reason why, all that aside, the reason why he's in this list is he has undeniably changed in a short amount of time what his competitors thought was possible. You go back to 2011 and 2 at 41 was a thing. It was a benchmark. It was probably going to get you on a lot of podiums, and just in the span of a few short years, when this kid started running it and running it and running it and running it, that's when obviously a lot of other skiers followed suit, especially the last couple of years. I think he is, while he hasn't had the impact on equipment or the way people think about ski setup or design, he definitely raised the bar in what people felt was possible, and furthermore, how long it should take you to get there. We a lot of us improved in quarter buoy increments. Once you got past 39 for a heck of a long time, and he just blew the doors off of that theory.
Right. So I agree he belongs on the list, but let me argue against him.
Yeah.
When you look at Bob and Chris and their influence and their domination, not Bob and Chris, Bob and Andy,
Mm-hmm.
They came in and maybe there was opportunity to advance those high scores so far, but really Nate has moved the world record by 1 buoy.
Mm-hmm. Now,
as a competitor, he is as dominant at tournaments or more perhaps than Mapple, but Parrish ran 2 at 43, and Nate has come in and moved it to 3 at 43.
Yeah. You're right. But as we get higher up the scale,
right.
A number isn't a number anymore, right? I mean, it gets a little bit skewed in terms of 1 buoy at 43 isn't worth what 1 buoy at 41 was worth, or even 1 buoy at 39 was worth. But you're 100% right. The only other counter to that, and maybe why it's a little bit preemptive to lock him down as one of the all-times, is our sample size is still pretty small. We're looking at 2012 to current, so we're only looking at like a 7-year window, but that 7 years, that level of dominance is definitely unparalleled. The numbers are never ever going to reflect what the previous generation's numbers were, simply because there's far fewer tournaments. So for him to get the number of titles, pro event titles, and all that is it's never going to happen. but his win percentage is staggering. So yeah, he's definitely on my short list, not on my final list yet.
Oh, okay, all right. But so here's where this conversation gets a little bit sexy. Who's number 4?
So I know this one's tough. Like I have 5 people on this list to nail down one. I think we'd be crazy, and again, it's so hard because the previous generation had more events but I mean, with what Regina Jacquez has already accomplished in the sport of slalom skiing, she's already won 4 world titles, 8 world records. She should be tough to not have on your short list or immediate list to put in the top 4 of all time.
If it's a slalom list, men and women, no question, my list would be done right there. It would be Regina, Bob, Andy, Nate, finished. I'm kind of thinking about this as men's slalom and women's slalom because men and women aren't the same, right? Some of us are born with boy parts and some are born with girl parts, and I think that's a different. I think there's value in 2 lists.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's we're gonna work towards that in a future show. Then let's we'll work towards a women's list in the future. Then, so does that mean you have Nate on your short list or on your immediate list? He's in or he's pending?
I think Nate's in regardless. I don't think Nate can get off the list unless some new, unless Blaze Grubbs runs 3:43 at Moomba this year. I don't think you're going to get Nate off this list. But it's that 4th position. To me, Regina goes on the ladies' list.
Okay.
If it's one list, men and women, Regina's on it. I don't know who can kick her off, and I don't know who can kick Nate off. So that's where I'm at. So if you take Regina off your men's list, do you have a number 4?
This one gets tough too. So I mean, the reason why Bob and Andy are both no-brainers, besides what they accomplished on the water, both changed the sport in terms of the technology. With Mapple and Zero Off and the work he did with Nautique and O'Brien, and then Bob with ski design and how he was able to transcend and fast forward into 20 years down the road, and he's still building some of the most talked about skis in the market. That's where Nate's lacking. But that's where so if we're going to add another person from the current era, that's where that's where Will Asher pops in on this list, and you'd have trouble denying him, from the work he's done with Malibu boats to we're going on 15 years of design work for HO skis. So we're going to go from the he entered on sort of the Monza era to A1, A3, and then these pros and alphas and stuff that's currently being used right now. He has that that engineer's mind, that builder's touch, that while he may not have learned it directly from Andy, he definitely picked up where Andy left off. And then we can also go, okay, five-time Masters champion, 2-time world champion, 5-time Malibu Open, 4-time European champion, 4-time European champion. Doesn't have a world record. Had one, I think, that was knocked back, or tied it once that was knocked back or disallowed for whatever reason. So he's got this big long career going back to his first win was probably in 2003 or something. I mean, it was a long time ago. To still the guy on the podium now. So he's got this. He's kind of has it all too, where he has shaped the sport, literally in terms of shaping skis and also he made us all rethink his predecessors included what it meant to be an athlete. He was one of the first that, while Andy and the guys before him were working out, but no one took it. Will took it to a completely different level. He made us all reconsider, how hard are we working? How hard should we be working? And that's trickled down into the younger generation, and it wasn't there before Will.
Okay, so here's the problem with your criteria. And I don't have the notes to back this up, but that's a future show, I guess. If you're going to put Will on the list on that criteria, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Will Asher fan,
Mm-hmm.
but if Will gets on that criteria, how does KLP not make the list on the same criteria? How are you sure that Will Asher has had more impact than Chris LaPointe? Because Chris LaPointe has a couple world records.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't dig too deep into his list because I didn't think he made my 4. But he's Bob's older brother. Literally dozens of national titles, a couple of world records.
Mm-hmm.
He shaped
titles.
world title. I think so. He shaped Mastercraft boats back in the day. He shaped when there was a Mastercraft O'Brien ski and then a Mastercraft ski, or the other way around. He was at O'Brien for decades. He partnered, you jump forward, and he didn't go anywhere, but you jump forward, and he was working with Andy, and then ran Andy's company design-wise after we lost Andy. Design technology progression-wise, I think that Chris LaPointe is possibly the most important figure in the last 40 years.
Okay, and that one. So again, this is another one. You would have it. It's tough to argue if we're going to have. If there's only 4 spots, that's where some of this gets gray. So then I'm going to go from there. The last person on my list. And eventually we're going to narrow this down, and we're going to own our list. It's not going to be today. But from there, it's Herb O'Brien, 100%.
Oh my God.
So from hand shaping wooden O'Brien skis in his parents' basement on Lake Sammamish to, the first compression molded fiberglass slalom skis and O'Brien skis, where then turned to HO with the first kind of a hybrid binding design and not just flat overlays, to 2006, starting his final company, Radar, with a true hardshell hybrid and hand building skis on Radar Lake. And so if we're going, design, who has shaped this sport the most, from that side of things, man, Herb is on my short list for that final spot, and I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna have to dig deep to find a reason to put Will above Herb or Chris above Herb, or there's just so many others, Lucky Lowe.
Wow.
and there's a bunch of dudes, but it would be, I think you would be doing yourself a disservice to not give long consideration to how Herb is still shaping the sport today.
Wow, right. And if you're gonna go Herb, my comeback to that is Denny.
Yeah.
Denny Kidder has been around as long as Herb, and I'd have to go back and find my interviews with Denny, but Denny worked for Herb, and I mean, if you want to go back 50 years, the guys that started EP, Roger Teeter and Denny and Herb and Pat Conley and all those guys, I mean, it's a big mix together. All those guys were together. Mm-hmm. But Denny has owned a ski company who has provided the equipment to break world slalom records, world trick records, world jump records, men and women both. Mm-hmm. So I want to throw you a curveball. I hadn't really thought about Denny and Herb, and I think that's really valid. I don't know if that's a different definition of the list, but so. my four guys, my fourth guy was Parrish. Call me crazy. 4 world records, 2 Masters championships. but to me, he's the icon of skiing in my adult life, right? I mean, I know, in the last 10 years, it's all been Nate Smith, Nate Smith, Nate Smith. But when I watch Chris Parrish ski, I understand what he's doing. I realize that he moved the record all the way to 2 at 43. To me, he is on the water, purely on the water, not talking influence, not talking technology, not talking ski design. I don't know of a skier that I more admire behind the boat than Chris Parrish.
Yeah, and not much older than Chris. So why he was so important to me. What was he was there was a lot of really, really good young guys, but he was the first one that started winning. He's not that old, but he's old enough that he beat Wade Cox, he beat Andy Mappel. He was like the first guy to chisel his way in there. So we're gonna add him to our short list, and we're gonna come up with our 4. But that's if you were gonna find a reason to not add CP, all I can think of is surprisingly no world title. And then I guess maybe the only other reason would be, kind of like Nate, not really driving technological advances, but it's not, that's not necessarily his job either. He's a skier. Not everyone wears both hats that well. So we're going to continue this because we're going to get down to our 4. I mean, it sounds like our only for sure's, for me, my only for sure is Mappel and Bobble Point.
Agreed.
I got 2 more that I got to put on there. So if we're talking about people that really, really change the way things are done, then we'd be remiss to not next time also talk about Jamie Bushane, Marcus Brown, Mike Siderhound. This is going to be a little harder than initially I might have imagined, but there's only 4 spots. There's only 4 spots.
All right. Well, so this is fun, and I'm hearing you that maybe it's 4 names, period. But I had prepared a draft of my women's Mount Rushmore. So let me throw that at you, and then we'll go on with our days. Regina Jaquess. I mean, she belongs on the list almost any way you slice it. 8 world records, from 1 at 41 to 4 at 41. 2 Masters, 4 World Championships. She is, as you've stated in other shows, one of the best 34-mile-an-hour skiers in the world, man or woman, today. Also on my list, pretty clearly, is Christy Overton. 5 world records. She took the record from 1 at 39 to 1 at 41. That's a 6-ball increase in 4 years, 92 to 96. She also has 6 Masters and 1 World Championship.
No brainer.
And then that brings us to somebody who I think is almost forgotten in the modern era, is Dina Mappel, with 5 world records from 2 at 38 to 1 at 39. That's 5 balls in 8 years. Mm-hmm. She also has 3 Masters championships, and I didn't write it down, but I think she's got more world jump records than she has slalom records, and she's got multiple slalom, jump, and overall world titles. Really one of the greatest 3-event women skiers in the history of the sport. And then to get to my 4th spot, it's tough because I tried to cut it off at 1980 being the modern era. So if you chop it off at 1980, it's got to be Jennifer Leachman-LaPointe with 3 world records from 3 at 38 to 3 at 39. That's 5 balls in 11 years. But if you go all the way back to 1970, somebody who I think is really forgotten currently is Cindy Todd, with 5 world records from 2 at 35 to 2 at 38. That's 6 balls in 7 years, 3 world titles, and 3 Masters. So, You know, I just maybe we don't have a men's and women's list, but I really hate to see the accomplishments of these Hall of Fame skiers overlooked.
Yeah, another list, another day.
Yeah, let's know
There's
that. Exactly.
no one on there, isn't obvious. No one you just listed, it isn't obviously a real game changer when it comes to the sport as a whole.
Right.
We're not even done the first list, so we're gonna have to tackle that one.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go do some more research.
Awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
John.
Thank you, Trent.
Yep.